For their new Catherine Bleish. Hi everybody. Really great to be back in Kansas City. It's been quite a treat. I've only been able to come back about once a year for a couple years now, and we spent the past week and a half here in Missouri, and we have another week and a half. John told me I'm going to have to yell louder. Maybe we can find out if that can be dealt with. We did go down to our family lake house in southern Missouri earlier this week, and unfortunately it rained the first day, and the next day all three of us came down with awful allergies. So we came back a day early to try and fully recover, but I am a little sniffly nose, and I am still a little scratchy in the throat. So please bear with me. I might have to step over and get a drink of water, which I brought up here. So I'm going to try and be as detailed as possible when it comes to relevant issues that I think would interest you guys, and also as vague as possible, so as not get too in-depth in anything here today, because I want to give you both a history of the Liberty Restoration Project and the journey that the activists who put this organization together have been on, and the journey that I myself have gone on that has led me to transition from really an intense politically active lifestyle to a more laid-back gardening style lifestyle, and I think it's a really important transition for me, and I really would like to share both of those aspects with you because I learned a lot of lessons during my years as a political activist, and I think they are things that are relevant to everybody right now, considering we just had the recent election and we went through another Ron Paul, sort of rise and fall of super energy and outpouring of money and all of that. So I'll start out by letting everybody know the Liberty Restoration Project came into fruition during a meeting in December of 2007, and it was a what's next meeting. Moving forward, we already knew as a group, as Ron Paul activists, GOP activists trying to restore the party, that something was going to happen after 2008 elections were over, that we were going to have to continue working to find liberty in our lifetime, and it would have to be bigger than Ron Paul. So we had our first brainstorming meeting, and we brought together all of the activists who were involved in the Ron Paul revolution at the time, and we talked about what we wanted to do, and we had the idea of putting together an organization that could carry the ball moving forward, and I just sort of took the lead on just making sure the meetings were happening and that people were getting together and that discussions were happening. And after that first meeting, we decided two things. One, we were going to meet every Wednesday, every week. And the first hour of our meeting was dedicated to the Ron Paul Revolution, and we were talking about things that we were going to do to become delegates and to get as many delegates as possible to the Republican National Convention. We were talking about working within the GOP and not so much infiltrating. Some people looked at it that way. Some people looked at it as just being accepted by them and proving our worth to them. And then we would spend the second hour of our meeting discussing Liberty Restoration Project and the formation of that. And we went through a series of grassroots surveys where we surveyed the movement. We asked, what are you interested in? What do you want to do moving forward as a movement? And we sat and we discussed the results of that survey, and we put together an organization that we officially launched in April of 2008 at the celebration party for all of the delegates going to the state convention for Ron Paul. So there was a big cake with Ron Paul's face on it, and all the delegates for the state convention that were Ron Paul supporters were there, and we unveiled this plan to start the Liberty Restoration Project, and it was really an exciting day, an exciting time for all of us. Now, the Ron Paul delegate process was full of strife for the people here in Kansas City and the activists all across the country. I mean, really, if you get on the internet and you search through the forums and the messages and the meetup group emails that were going around the country at that time, there was a lot of strife taking place and a lot of the organizational efforts involving Ron Paul and the Republican convention and the delegate process. There was a lot of internal issues that I do believe now as a leader I am better able to deal with, and at the time, as a group, we allowed tyrant personalities into our organizing ranks, and we allowed people to overrun meetings and to bully their will and to really push things that maybe everybody wasn't on board with. And me being 23 years old, I had no idea how to deal with these sorts of personalities. And the honest truth is, I let the organizational process get railroaded many times. And many times, LRP as an institution fell apart. The delegates that were working together separated and factioned. And both of these processes, because they involved the same people, were going through similar strife and similar drama. It was simultaneously happening across the country, and it was a very unfortunate thing, in my opinion, that this was allowed to go on. But we allowed it, we tolerated it. We thought, gosh, if they're a Ron Paul supporter, they have to be good people because there's only so many of us and we're all so connected and we feel like brothers and sisters all of a sudden, and we have this instant bond. And that was something that was really hard, I think, as a movement for us to get through. But because the ideas of liberty were so powerful, that even though we did not do the right thing in preventing these personalities from railroading a lot of things, we were able to push through and to come through on the other side and continue organizing through that process, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. Now, for me, I was able to go to the Republican National Convention as a delegate. So that means I was elected at the county level, the district level, the state level, and pushed for, well, actually I wasn't elected at the state level, excuse me, I was one of the 3 elected at the district level that go on to represent your district to the Republican National Convention. I had these grand hopes that we would be able to go to the Republican National Convention as contingents of Ron Paul supporters from all across the country, that we would be able to make motions on the floor as we had at the state conventions. We would be able to change the platform, and we would be able to influence the party. And what we were met with was not only resistance from the Republican Party, but resistance from Campaign for Liberty itself and the Ron Paul machine. And that was something that was really hard to deal with. We began organizing after all the Missouri delegates pushed through. The national delegates began organizing in meetup groups, and there were actual efforts by Campaign for Liberty to stop meetup groups that had elected Ron Paul delegates to the RNC to joining our effort to organize nationally. And all we were looking to do was to bring together the delegates from all across the country that had been elected and to come up with an idea, a plan, something to do while we were there. And the biggest obstacle we faced to that was Campaign for Liberty. It had become Campaign for Liberty at this point. And that was another wake-up call for me, that we were not only allowing tyrant personalities within our small organizing groups at a local level, but we were also allowing it to happen at the national level. And there were bullies within Campaign for Liberty that were, it was really grassroots versus corporate machine. And a lot of people had a hard time accepting that the Ron Paul campaign could be a corporate machine. And so that caused a lot of angst for people, and people did not know what to do. And as a delegate, I will tell you, I showed up to the RNC, I traveled up there with the delegates from Missouri, and it was one of the worst weeks of my life. It was so heartbreaking. I felt like I was an extra on a TV set. There was absolutely no role for me other than to be in this chair with these people who were cheering about war and bombing Iran and cheering on these awful, awful people that were up there talking about how they wanted to dictate the world's, energy consumption and war this, bomb that. It was just awful. At that time period, there was a lot of war rhetoric within the Republican Party. This is, of course, before Obama was elected. And before that sentiment, sort of shifted toward, I think, one that we influenced in the liberty movement. And I was so afraid because of all of the turmoil that we had experienced at not being accepted by these people, these awful people, that I took, let's see, this ring right here, it's a peace sign. I took it off and didn't wear it at RNC. I've had this on my finger since 2005. And I was too afraid to wear it at the RNC because I was afraid of being rejected by these people who I was convinced by the Ron Paul campaign I needed to impress and that I needed to win the approval of, because we had to get in and we had to change the GOP from the inside. And there were some delegates there, Ron Paul supporters, that were really brave. And they went around and tried to get signatures to get Ron Paul a speaking spot on the floor, because he was the only Republican candidate who had not been given that opportunity to speak on the floor. And some of them were spit in the face. I mean, like, treated so awfully by the regular GOP candidates that I felt like I was just standing there watching the hearts of all these people being broken, and we were reaching out to the Ron Paul campaign and we said, what are we supposed to do? And they said, attend the rally for the Republic. That's what you're supposed to do. Because really there was no role for us there at the RNC, and despite the massive movement and momentum that we had gained at the district and state conventions, there was no role at the RNC, and Ron Paul and his campaign knew that. And for me, I felt betrayed because I felt like I had given my time, my energy, my heart, and my soul to this process for a man who in the end didn't even meet with the delegates or thank them for all of their work, and who left them hanging at this event where they felt totally isolated and totally abandoned and felt that as if they had absolutely no support. And interestingly enough, at a similar time period, I was helping a project called the Revolution March put together, and this brought together 12,000 activists to Washington, D.C. in July of 2008. The reason we put on this event is because Ron Paul called for a grand rally, a march of the people, and we said we can do that. We will put together a grand rally, and everything was going smoothly until all of a sudden the Rally for the Republic came up, which was the big Ron Paul event that took place during the National Republican Convention a couple blocks away. Then all of a sudden, Campaign for Liberty, the Ron Paul campaign, they were refusing to promote the Revolution March, and we got another taste of looking up to someone who we idolized, not supporting us and not supporting the grassroots. And despite the obstacles that we faced with the lack of support from the campaign and the Campaign for Liberty, which I guess at the time we felt entitled to, and we were very bitter about the fact that because we had given so much, we felt entitled to at least have a, hey, this event's going on, return. We did bring together 12,000 people, and that's the same amount of people that attended with the Rally for the Republic. And I think that really stands testament to show that the grassroots can organize just as well as the million-dollar machines. And we need to remember that as grassroots activists, that we don't need to centralize our resources. We don't need to centralize all of our hope and our faith in one man, because we as the grassroots can organize events just as powerful as the events that they organize themselves. So that was a major lesson for me, and it was a wake-up call for me. It broke my heart. I felt like I was looking up to this man, and he had all of these people giving up their lives. People's families were in disarray because they were spending so much time organizing for this man, who many in the end felt abandoned by. Now, at this point in time, let's see, this was 2008, the Republican convention was late in the summer. The next major event that took place was the In the Fed rally, and this was the first nationwide In the Fed rally, and it sort of gave an outlet for all of the 2008 Ron Paul activists to blow off their steam. And this is where I met a lot of the new crop of Liberty Restoration Project members, because a lot of Ron Paul 2008 people, they fizzled out, they were exhausted, they couldn't do it anymore. They went home, they shut their doors, and they said, this sucks. I never want to be involved in politics again. I don't like fighting for liberty. It exhausts me. We just get yelled at, door slammed in the face. So a lot of people went home, shut their doors, but a lot of new people came out, and this is how I met Chris and Tracy Ward, and a lot of new folks came out to organize for the In the Fed rally. And it felt really good to bring together a crowd of over 200 people who marched from the Federal Reserve Bank down to the IRS, and to realize that we still have momentum. We don't need a Ron Paul campaign. We can keep moving forward. We really got involved with the Liberty Restoration Project in street activism at this point. And every Wednesday we continued our meetings. The Ron Paul campaign was over, so we didn't have to talk about Republican Party strategy anymore. We realized that that was a ridiculous thing for us to be involved in at the time. And we decided that we were going to just reach out to the streets in Kansas City. So we handed out constitutions, we handed out flyers on the difference between a republic and a democracy. We went to the parade, Easter parade, and filled Liberty messages and Easter eggs and left them all over the parade route. You know, we did all this really fun stuff to reach out to the community. And we were preparing for the 2009 state legislative session. Now this was a really important time for Liberty Restoration Project and activists across the country, because the 2009 state legislative session marked the beginning of the really large rise in 10th Amendment nullification movement efforts that were taking place. So we had 4 nullification bills in Missouri. 3 of them passed. One of them by the skin of our teeth. I will tell you what, there was an effort to stop the Real ID in Missouri, and the opponents of that, who want, I'm sure everybody's aware of the Real ID, if not, it's a national driver's license that takes a lot of biometric information and keeps it in a centralized database, RFID chips, etc., etc. And we wanted to stop that from happening in Missouri. And of course, there are always political players who are going to reap the benefits of such a thing being implemented, and they do not want to stop it. And it literally took us walking into the state capitol with video cameras, live interviews on the radio in the hallway, marching outside of Senator Shields' office because he was blocking it from a vote on the floor. And we used high-pressure tactics. This was new to us. We were trying to fit in with the Republican Party before, and we decided to put our feet down in the state capitol, and we really... Some people didn't like the way I handled the situation. In hindsight, you know, maybe things could have gone differently, I don't know. But what matters is it went for a vote on the floor, and Senator Charlie Shields met with a group of 16 of us who was refusing to meet with before, with 10 video cameras on him, drilling him on the Real ID, calling him out on, you know, having a Real ID processing facility going up in his district, on the spot, on camera, doing interviews in the hallway outside of his office, high-pressure situation. He put it on the floor to vote the next day, and it passed unanimously in the Missouri Senate, and we stopped the Real ID from coming into fruition here in Missouri. That was groundbreaking activism, and LRP was really phenomenal in organizing with all of the groups across the state of Missouri and binding together and showing up in mass and putting on high-pressure tactics to make things happen. At the same time, the Missouri Information Analysis Center released a report calling Ron Paul supporters, libertarian activists, people who were upset about the banking system, the taxing system, potential radical domestic terrorists. And this document was written by the Missouri Highway Patrol and was released to surrounding fusion centers or surrounding law enforcement institutions. And the Liberty Restoration Project, in conjunction with organizations all across, not only the state of Missouri and across the country, again, utilize these high-pressure tactics to go and put pressure on the governor's office and on the police department, the highway patrol, and the different levels of government that were involved with this. And the head of the MIAC Fusion Center was removed. He did keep a government job, but we were able to testify in 4 legislative hearings and special committee hearings across the state on this issue. And during that process, we watched the evolution of several state reps, one of them being Representative Brian Nieves out of, I think it's Washington, Missouri, near St. Louis. At first he sort of smirked at us and laughed at us, but by the end of it he was railing on the federal government and talking about the 10th Amendment and sovereignty. He later became a darling of the Tea Party movement and speaking at 10th Amendment rallies all across the state and really helped to push 10th Amendment legislation through later in the session. And I think that is really important for all of us to keep in mind that when we're just showing up to activism-related things and we're speaking our mind, we are educating those who are, quote, in power. We're educating our peers, but we're also educating the people in power. And we were able to really help ideologically shift some of the representatives in the state of Missouri. And I think that's really a testament to how angry the activists were about being profiled as potentially radical, violent militia members, because we are not violent people. We preach nonviolence, and although I do believe all government is violence, at the time I didn't understand that, and I felt like I was at least preaching good government and you know, trying to find a way for people to coexist peacefully and acting as a peaceful person myself. So to think that a law enforcement officer could walk up to my car, seeing a Ron Paul bumper sticker and think, oh my gosh, could this person be violent? That really shook people up. Now, that inspired great research for me on fusion centers, and I was blessed to start attending some national events. Because of our activism with the Liberty Restoration Project here in Missouri, I started getting invited to speak at national events across the country. So the first one was Pork Fest, which is out in New Hampshire. I'm sure all of you heard of the Free State Project, which is an effort up there to bring liberty-minded people up there. And I spoke about the fusion centers and how there was one being currently created in New Hampshire. And Tracy Ward went with me on that trip, and it really was influential for me, and I want to bring it up because I want all of you to look into this organization and the philosophies that they espouse, if you have not heard of them, because it really helped me to begin an evolution. I had spent a lot of time doing the political activism, state legislative activism, Ron Paul presidential campaign, worked on state campaigns, yada, yada, yada. I go out to New Hampshire and people are talking about just living free. This concept was so radically different and so new to me that it absolutely blew my mind. The idea that people could just be living free and they don't have to go fight for their freedom. But this is when it was just introduced to me. So it lit a very small spark that eventually began to grow into a big flame. At that same time, I would watch Tracy Ward go through this amazing evolution, being around all these fantastic activists out there. She came home on fire. I mean, it was a transition I'd never seen in another activist. It happened instantaneously. We got home from Pork Fest, and this girl started moving and shaking, and she started organizing, and she just was really driven and really focused. And what a blessing, because I was becoming obsessed with fusion centers, and I was starting to find myself in Missouri less and less, and I was so hyper into that had she not jumped up and began to fill the gaps that I was leaving behind, I don't know what would have happened to LRP. I'm sure somebody would have stepped up and filled that role, but watching that transition was absolutely beautiful. So if any of you have the opportunity, every June, it's the Porcupine Freedom Festival. It happens in New Hampshire. I would encourage you to take the family out. It's a week-long event, and you really get an opportunity to see on a micro level what a free functioning economy can look like. People barter in silver. They bring things that they create throughout the year back in their home states or in New Hampshire, and they bring it to Porcupine Freedom Fest and they sell it. And that's where I really was first exposed to the idea of a barter economy. And this slowly started to set into my mind, but at this point it really didn't mean much at the time. I began speaking at tea parties, and again, everywhere LRP activists went, we were met with friction because we are just so different from all of these other big name groups. We're different from the hyper Ron Paul people because we understand that you can't idolize people. We learned that lesson. You know, we're different from the Tea Party groups because we already got over the whole Republican conservative fanaticism worship thing. Yet for some reason I felt inclined to go speak at tea parties. I felt like it was really important to be bringing a voice that was different to the Tea Party event. So eventually they asked me if I was a 9/11 truther. Now I mentioned to everybody how during the formation of LRP there was all of this crazy drama that took place. It was internal stuff. A lot of that was over the issue of, can LRP talk about the issue of 9/11 truth? No, yes, wrong, split down the middle. So of course, I was terrified of the topic. I never looked into it. I wanted nothing to do with it. After watching everybody fight over it, hearing Ron Paul deflect the question, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. They put me on the spot. I was supposed to speak in front of the St. Louis Arch, and they said, we need to know, are you a 9/11 truther? Give me a minute, I'm going to get on Google. So I go get on the internet, I do a Google search. I mean, like 20 minutes later, I'm calling back, I'm going, I can't say that I'm not. And that was the end of my Tea Party speaking frenzy extravaganza that took place. And I think it's important to point this out, that when you're working with other groups, there are issues that sometimes they just won't touch, and they put up barriers. And as activists, we have to be making sure that we are not doing the same. I know when I was involved with Ron Paul stuff, it's Ron Paul or the highway, and you know, the libertarians hated me because I was so into Republicans. You know, the Republicans hated me because I was so into Ron Paul, and the Ron Paul people hated me because I didn't think Ron Paul was doing a good job, and I thought he was backstabbing the grassroots. So when you are being true to yourself, you're going to be met with opposition, and I think it's really important that we are standing firm in our beliefs, but that we are not so obsessed with our own ideas that we refuse to listen to those of others. I blocked out the idea of anything on 9/11, wouldn't look into it because other people were so hypersensitive about it. Now that I've looked into it, you know, yeah, lots of questions. I do need to go there, no, not right now, but I am fascinated by the subject, and I think it's worth everybody looking into. But kicking people out of organizations, destroying the progress of groups, it's not worth fighting over these things, you guys. If we really want liberty, we have to learn to be accepting of competing ideas. And if somebody disagrees with you, if you're secure in your ideas and you've done your research, you should be able to have a conversation that is not emotional, that is fact-based, and state your case and make your point. But if you are insecure in your ideas and you are emotional and you are going to throw up those barriers and you're going to do yourself the disservice of cutting out strong, active people who can really make a difference in whatever issue it is that you're working on. Now, Liberty Restoration Project decided to take on putting on a big event. We called it Midwest Liberty Fest. Now here's another place where I failed as a leader for Liberty Restoration Project and for myself. I had met a guy in the Ron Paul delegate process organizer who was really awesome and really helpful and helped at the national level really get things going. He, from Illinois, and many other Illinois activists wanted to join with LRP and put on this Midwest Liberty Fest. The issue of tyranny in the group came up. Everybody in LRP in Kansas City quit except for me. Why did I not take this as a warning sign? I have no clue. Long story short, the day of the event, I've got my feet on 6 different icebergs trying to pull them together as the ocean's ripping them apart. It was awful. It was awful. I'll just leave it at that. We'll leave the details for another day, but I want to point this out, that in our organizational group settings, if you have a bully who is taking over and pushing people out, it is time to get rid of that person. Because that one person, no matter how much they've contributed in the past, no matter how much they're contributing in the present, their energy is not worth the sacrifice of everybody else. And I was stuck at that event by myself with a bully who actually physically hit me at that event, so he was a real bully of the real sort. And I had no support team there because I had abandoned them by not listening to them when they said, we cannot work with this person. So please take that as a lesson that I learned and that we should all learn moving forward. It just can't be tolerated. It just cannot be tolerated. Now, 2 days after Midwest Liberty Fest, I decided to take a break from activism, and I left my cell phone and my computer, everything at home. And I ended up getting arrested that day. And it was awful. It was just absolutely awful. I was waiting outside of a courthouse. There was an officer. It was dark outside. It was sleeting. And he was telling people to line up against the wall. And I didn't think it was right. I made a comment to a girl standing next to me. He heard me. He asked me to repeat it. I repeated it. He puffed his chest up, asked me if I wanted to be arrested. I said no. What for? He said I'll make something up. And despite most of the people there telling me to leave, I stood my ground. And for whatever reason, by the grace of God, I had a piece of paper and a pen in my pocket, and I wrote, officer just told me he would make up a reason to arrest me. And I handed it to my friend, and I said, if I get arrested, please have people sign as witnesses that he said this. It's a very long story short. I did go get processed into jail. I was arrested by Maplewood, Missouri, for speaking. The charge that I was later informed after I had been kicked out of the jail of what I had been charged with, which was failure to comply with an officer, section 22.21 of their city code, is what I was charged with in hindsight. He didn't really have something to charge me with at the beginning, and every time I asked officers, what am I being charged with, what am I being charged with, what am I being charged with, they couldn't tell me. They had no idea. You broke some law is what they told me. And this was a wake-up call for me. It was my first experience with law enforcement. At the RNC, there was, of course, police officers everywhere and in military gear, and it was really scary and overwhelming. But this was my first time in a local setting dealing with a rogue officer. And it was really upsetting to me. They made me take out my nose ring, which is it's a pretty permanent thing. It like bleeds when you take it out. It doesn't have something removed. You have to pull a ball through. And they told me if I didn't take that out, they were going to call down medical, pin me down, and cut it out. And that's when I broke down and started crying. And in hindsight, I was weak for doing that. I don't think they would have actually done it, and I'll explain why I don't think they would have actually done it later. But I think that I complied with something that caused me physical pain, and I think it's unfortunate. I don't know, it bothers me in hindsight that I complied with these people. You know, they had kidnapped me, they had put me in a cage. And 2.5 years later, I did get a settlement from them that ended up paying the midwife to birth my daughter. And they were in the wrong, and I got an apology. But I had to be at the police department every day, week after week after week, with video cameras, tape recorders, activists. We put on a Constitution training day, LRP sponsored it in St. Louis, where we went out into the community and we handed out flyers everywhere, and we asked people to come learn about the Constitution, because the police department here obviously has no idea what it means or what it stands for or what their oath to it is. But we got about 12 people from the St. Louis community. It was really neat. They showed up and they learned a little bit. And eventually, the police department sent me through their insurance department, and my attorney, it was basically like an insurance claim, and they paid me out. I realized that by, again, standing my ground and doing the right thing, while it was traumatic, while it was happening, had I backed down and said, okay, I'll leave, officer, you're going to make up a reason to put me in jail, I wouldn't be the empowered woman that I am today. That experience was really, it was upsetting for me, but it helped me to realize the strength that I have within myself, because I stood up and I pushed back against tyranny, against my body, and I won. And I was granted restitution. And many people who are abused by the state don't have the energy to fight back. And for me, it was empowering to know that I could do it. And hopefully it helps inspires other people to fight back as well. Now, when this happened, I had recently been elected to go to the Continental Congress of 2009 as a delegate. There were 3 delegates chosen from every state. This was a grassroots movement put on by Bob Schultz at the We the People Foundation to bring together 3 delegates from every state in the country to figure out what the heck we were going to do. The Ron Paul campaign was over, people were really upset, and people were looking for some sort of guidance, some sort of structure. That event, which was funded by donations to get out there, was absolutely life-changing for me. Some of the amazing people that I met were John Bush, who's looking out the window now for our daughter. John was doing very similar stuff to Liberty Restoration Project through a group called Texans for Accountable Government. He was the executive director of Texans for Accountable Government. They formed 6 months after us. It was the same thing. Ron Paul crew decided, okay, that was intense. We're going to start an organization and we're going to move on and plow forward. Then similarly, they went through the internal strife. It's just the same story. 10th Amendment legislation in the State House, same stuff. Literally mirrored activism in Texas and Missouri. And the Texas delegation sat right in front of the Missouri delegation. And so John and I were both pushing back on fusion centers in our own area. John was trying to prevent the Austin Regional Intelligence Center from being implemented. It didn't exist. And I was still on my obsessive nose to the ground, I'm going to defeat the Maya Act for saying these things about us, because they're awful things to say. And we really bonded over that. And at the Continental Congress, we put together this project called Operation Defuse. And Texans for Accountable Government and Liberty Restoration Project partnered to create Operation Defuse, which was a movement to educate the liberty movement about fusion centers. That was really all we wanted to do. We wanted to learn about them ourselves, make sure we understood them. I don't think that's right. We wanted to learn about the fusion centers ourselves, which meant we wanted to go visit them all across the country. So we put together a plan. We looked up all the fusion centers in certain state chunks of the country, 8 states at a time or so. We found the major fusion centers there. We found the major activist groups there. And we organized, we budgeted down to the penny, the gas mileage, what it would take to drive to each of these cities, visit these fusion centers, interview their staff. If they wouldn't interview us, then at least have them on tape refusing to speak with us, and then teach the local activist movement there about fusion centers and what they can do to work with their fusion center to try and keep it from potentially doing something like the Missouri Information Analysis Center did. So John and I traveled the country. We visited well over 20 fusion centers. Other activists did the same things. They took different parts. We went through the south, we went up through the east, and it was absolutely exhausting. I can't describe this project in any other way, and it's really not something that anyone except some single people who are willing to sit in a... It was me and John, 2 Rottweilers, in a Ford Escape, and we would drive 16 hours, from Austin to Phoenix. We would wake up after 4 hours of sleep, do a radio show together. We were doing a show on the air in Austin together called the Rise Up Radio Show. And we would, and keep in mind, I'm at this point just traveling and speaking about fusion centers. That's what I'm doing. I'm still executive director of LRP, but Tracy's over here in Missouri like, Cat, I guess I'm running things now. And I'm just running around like a mad woman screaming, fusion centers, danger, 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 everyone look out. And we kept up this crazy, crazy schedule for months, month after month after month after month. And when we got up to New Hampshire, there was an event called Liberty Forum that I was the speaker for, John was the speaker for, and they had an event out there, and it was a 420 rally protest day, where they have this event where they go out and they all smoke pot in the town square to protest marijuana laws. They do it publicly, and in the town of Keene, the cops quit arresting them, and they just said, okay, they're going to do it every week, every day, they're just going to do this, just ignore them, whatever. They were doing this in a new city where the event was taking place in Nashua, and I wanted to go videotape this because I thought this was fascinating. So I showed up with my video camera, and very long story short, a crew of young African-American locals from the town of Nashua walked up, and I was so excited about locals. I'm like, hi, I'm Catherine, come meet everybody, and I'm like introducing them to everybody, and just making introductions. But because I had done that, when the event was winding down, and I felt a shift in energy on the other side of the statue. And I went walking up, and I saw one of those young black boys being arrested by an undercover officer. Some fuse went off in my brain, and I flipped out. I was so upset. I felt personally responsible for introducing these kids to people. And an undercover officer passed this 17-year-old a joint, and then arrested him. And I thought, this is absolutely awful. How could they come and just not only arrest one child, but one of the 3 African-American people here in this community? I cannot stand here and let this happen. And I had never been around civil disobedience. In New Hampshire, they practice civil disobedience, which I had never seen before, I'd never been exposed to before. And while he was being arrested, I walked up with the video camera, and I asked for his name, I had him spell it, and I told him we would have an attorney and we would come help him. Some other activists had lined up in front of the police car, and they were refusing to move. They sat down. Actually, no, they were standing there with their hands locked. And I had never seen something like this before, so when the officers got out of the car and approached these guys, I had no idea what was going on. All I know is that the activist, David Krause, dropped to the ground, and suddenly there's all of these activists surrounding this police car where there's 2 undercover officers, and they're chanting, let him go, let him go. I mean, it's a huge crowd of people. And now I'm in like hyperdrive. I cannot even imagine what is happening right now, but I see them starting to manhandle this guy. I don't know he's doing civil disobedience. I don't know what civil disobedience is, but all I know is that I see somebody manhandling one of our fellow activists. So I am up close and I'm saying repeatedly, because it was just what I don't know, it kept coming out of my mouth, was your children will smoke pot one day, do you want to ruin their life? Your children will smoke pot one day. You've probably smoked pot one day. Why are you arresting this child? And I was really, really upset. They drug the activist to the back of the police car, and I followed. Now, I was so into videotaping this event that when David reached up and said, somebody videotape my wrist, they're hurting my wrist, I zoom in like this, and a whole ton of backup law enforcement had shown up. I had no clue this was going on. I am so into this. And almost all of the activists have removed from the road. Keep in mind, there's a police car right here. They drug him to the back. And I'm right here. I turn around with my video camera, and there's a German Shepherd 4 feet from me on its hind legs, barking and snarling at teeth at me. And the first thing I say is, do not stick that dog on me, I am here to document this. His response was, arrest her! And here I am, surrounded by law enforcement, a dog barking in my face, pinned up against the car, and they arrest me. And I end up going to jail again, and I'm going to be honest, this 6-hour event really screwed me up. I became so depressed. I became obsessed with police brutality videos. I watched every single cop shooting a dog video on the internet, every single person being beat up at an activist event, every single, old Rodney King video, Seattle, G20, individuals, grandmas being tasered for being on a cell phone in the car. If there was a video of a law enforcement officer hurting another human being, I watched it and I drank wine and I cried over it. And I was really depressed and I was in a really, really bad state. And to the point, John and I had started dating, to the point that on our way back from Pork Fest that year, he left me in Kansas City at Tracy and Chris's house and said, I can't deal with this anymore. She's freaking losing her mind. And I was so depressed, I was so upset. And that experience, the 5 weeks being able to stay with Chris and Tracy, allowed me to reflect on the past 4 years and to look at all the crazy things that had happened into my life. and to begin to reassess, what is it that I want as a person? Why did I become an activist in the first place? What am I doing here? I am miserable. Look at me. I'm drinking wine, like a bottle and a half a day. That's disgusting, right? I mean, just absolutely disgusting. I was living at absolute bare poverty level. I closed out all my 401ks because I was a good little cubicle worker, worked for, Fortune 500. I saved a bunch of money. I found Ron Paul. I, went radical hippie. So I was living off my 401k, and I closed out my last savings account while I was at Tracy and Chris's house. And I said, this is it. I have to decide what I'm going to do with my life because I just spent my life savings being a Republican presidential candidate and then a fusion center nut job, right? I got to figure out what I'm doing with my life because I've been arrested, I've been traumatized. I was afraid to drive for a while, I'll be honest. Having that dog in my face made me so... And my dad's a veterinarian. I grew up living in the back of my parents' animal clinic. I had 2 Rottweilers on the road with me. That was traumatic for me, and it made me fear interacting with law enforcement. So that was the beginning of the transition for me. That was late summer 2010, and I spent a lot of time at Chris and Tracy's house doing artwork. I would get out the girls' art stuff, and I would draw with chalk. I made vision boards. I watched this documentary called The Secret, and if you haven't seen it, please watch it. Some of you may think it's a little too new agey, but I swear I began implementing these practices into my life of creating a vision board, deciding what you want, putting it up somewhere in your home, seeing it every day, and watching your life work in that direction. And that became really real for me. So I made my vision board at Tracy and Chris's house. I really reflected. And I came to some conclusions. The first is that I didn't want to fight for my freedom anymore. I wanted to be free. And I couldn't be happy when I was constantly at war. When the Republican Party didn't want me, when the Libertarian Party didn't want me, when the anarchists didn't want me. Nobody wanted me because I wanted true freedom. And that's not what all of these big centralized groups want. They want power run their way. Even if it's a minimized power. Ron Paul still wants government. Still wants to control certain aspects of certain people's lives. Still is okay with the state controlling certain aspects of certain people's lives. I wanted to be free. This, to me, meant that I needed to learn how to grow food immediately. I needed to learn how to provide for myself. Because I could see the forest for the trees. I could see that the economy was going to collapse someday, 10 years down the road, 1 year down the road. Who cares? We need to be prepared for this. Inflation has already, quadrupled the cost of food in the past 10 years. It's ridiculous. We need to be preparing, and that is the conclusion I came to. I need to learn how to grow my own food. I need stability. I can't live on the road with no home base. I can't deal with organizations that have internal conflict. I need stability, emotional stability, financial stability, and everybody told me, Kevin Covey was one of the most influential LRP activists during his time. Everybody told me, you're giving too much, Kat, of your time, your resources. You need to slow down and focus on yourself. And I said, no, everything's going to crash. I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go. And everyone said, you're going to burn out, you're going to burn out, you're going to burn out. And look what happened to me. I turned into a drunk, depressed burnout. Literally, I was awful. No one was fan to be around me. And, I look back at the time, it was hurtful to me that people would say, you're giving too much. How can you be giving too much? But I was. I was sacrificing my own well-being for something that in the end, I may not even philosophically align with. I may not philosophically align with Republican Party politics. Yet I gave so much of my time, so much of my energy, so much of my heart, so much of my soul. And that does not bring stability for anybody emotionally, financially. You can't help people find liberty as a community, as a nation, as a state, as a city, as a neighborhood, if you can't find it as an individual, which means you have to be able to take care of yourself. I decided I didn't want to work for people anymore because every time I worked a real job, I was always more competent than the people above me and I was always stifled. Every time I got involved with activist organizations where there was a hierarchy of some sort, there was internal strife, and I realized I just need to work on my own projects and do my own thing and make money how I can make money, providing my skills and my talents. And so I decided to sit down and reflect, what can I do as an individual, the skills, the tools, the talents that I have as a human being, what can I do to provide value to others? And I wanted to shift what I was putting into my body, focus on real health, solid relationships. So I took the time to sit down and figure out what I really wanted. And I decided I want to go somewhere where I can live on a farm in exchange for my labor and learn how to grow food. That's what I want to do. I want to go live somewhere in exchange for housing and garden and take care of their animals, yada, yada, yada. So I had a couple places across the country I was looking at. I was most interested in New Hampshire and Austin because Austin has such a thriving, vibrant community, so does New Hampshire. I ended up finding a place outside of Austin in Dripping Springs, Texas, where they had a, an 18-foot camper RV thing on their property, and I was able to go live there rent-free in exchange for doing garden work, taking care of the chickens, etc., etc. And that 6 months of my life was really exactly what I needed, but it also helped me to really begin to transition the way I lived my life. It was an abrupt stop. I was traveling nonstop with Operation Defuse. I stepped down as executive director of LRP right before I got arrested because I wasn't running LRP anymore. Tracy was, and there was no point in me. And I don't think really organizations do well with leadership longer than 2 years anyway. So on our 2-year birthday, I stepped down, and Tracy really began to focus on the red light camera activism, the TSA activism, and the different things that she would, everyone has different passions, we all follow those different passions, and I think it's fantastic. I found farming and gardening, and I slowed down my life dramatically, and I was living off of $200 a month. I had almost finished my master's degree. I decided I wanted to help organizations with strategic planning, and I helped TAG and some other organizations down in Texas with strategic planning, and that was how I was making money. That and building like really cheap WordPress websites, which of course I got in over my head with, and some of the sites crashed. Tracy's website crashed, Varsity Council came, it was awful. It was awful, but I tried, and I went out and I tried to make money on my own, and I bounced around from thing to thing until I started finding a groove that really worked for me. Now, at this time I want to read a quote from Ron Paul's speech today, his farewell speech. John copied and pasted it for me, and I appreciate him typing it out, because I think it's really relevant to right now. I have gone through all that crazy political activism. This is now, 2.5 years ago. But a lot of us here have gone through that right now with the 2012 election. And so I want to read to you what Ron Paul said today, because I think it's absolutely relevant to the transition that I'm talking about in my personal life, as well as where we all are here today as a group. He says, the number one responsibility for each of us is to change ourselves with hope that others will follow. This is of greater importance than working on changing government. That is secondary to promoting a virtuous society. If we can achieve this, then government will change. So here's Ron Paul, after years, decades of service in the political sector of our society, saying, political activism is not what is important. We need to change ourselves first. We need to look in the mirror and decide, what does being and living liberty mean to me? How can I live liberty and show others through my example what liberty means? And in doing that, and in teaching others about liberty and freedom, government will change.